Wow. Wow. We have listened through 30 tracks over the last few listening sessions from the Flat White album by Greg Barnett. I don't think there was a single weak track on this album. There are parts which I pointed out that I wasn't so sure about, which I think is important to do, because if I was just to give this album a passing grade, say it was perfect, when I found stuff I didn't like, that would be disingenuous, wouldn't it? Especially because this is literally the biggest music review I'd ever done in my life. Three hours long. Of course, if I upload this to YouTube, I will be putting chapters in so that people can see where all 30 of the songs are for reference. As I'm sure for Greg Barnett watching this, he will also probably need to have chapters for this. But the reality is, this is basically I think this is the big one for Greg. I don't imagine that there is a way anytime soon that he's going to be able to do anything bigger than this, just because, at least from my perspective, without knowing a lot about Greg, this would have been a phenomenal amount of effort. This is not something you write in a couple of days and just spit out onto the internet. The amount of time would have taken to record the individual parts, to structure and record these songs, the chord progressions were not simple at all. There were some really complex melodies going on there and complex harmonies going on there. Each of these tracks had their own unique identity. To write the lyrics for like at least 24 or 25 of the songs that weren't instrumentals, to know to put like Last Post and Agincourt in there, and it's not just this, like the staging of the album, knowing to spread different tracks apart to allow people to sort of come down from the intensity of a track like A Little Death, for example, right? Or Last Post coming into Sunrise. And just, this is a lot of who Greg Barnett is as a person, his struggles, his experiences with love and relationships, his understandings and affiliations and interests, and I suppose despair with things like The Last Post and Agincourt, where you hear of the person that had a perfectly wonderful life as a working in the fields after they crash landed in foreign territory. And even though they could have lived a happy life and had a family and stuff like that, they still wanted to go back because they felt this need to represent their country. It's, even though the country was invading the one that they went into, I think I may have that wrong. I don't quite know. You've got the conservation elements were the one that stood out for me the most. You know, I think that Greg Barnett wants the best for people, and I think that genuinely, this is one of the most mature, reserved takes I've had on the need to preserve the earth and take better care of it. You know, for someone to put this much effort into writing the music on this album, and then to be him to be as composed and sort of, for him to be able to deliver Earthrise like that and to not just be screaming at people in rage and anger, which I would completely understand given how strongly he feels about it. He's just so smart, and he knows that that's not the way to talk to people. I think even though this album is over 2 hours long, removing the talky talks I've been doing over this, thank goodness I don't have to do subtitles for this. You could not pay me to do subtitles for this. You know, or to get someone else to do subtitles for this. It'd just be too prohibitively expensive. I don't really know what else to say about this. I've covered all 30 tracks within each of them. This is why I listen to the tracks like individually so that people can get my thoughts on each of them. And I know I've had to stop and take a double take on some of them just because I think I missed parts. But I think that's me simply caring enough about the music, because if anything, Greg Barnett has definitely won my respect. You know, would I do if the music in this album, put it this way, if there'd been even one track in this album that I had thought had not been particularly good, I would have been disappointed. Because when you're writing a 30-track album, that needs to be perfect. You can't have a single weak track, because say the eighth song, A Little Death, was just terrible. People aren't going to listen to the other 22nd. Do you know what I mean? There's only a limited amount of singles you can put out for an album before people feel like they're being oversaturated, and before the people that were going to listen to the album would have listened to it. You know what I mean? So this is a careful collection of different things that Greg wanted to write about. It was carefully staged and selected. The parts were recorded practically flawlessly, bar one or two things that I think were stylistic anyways. The performances recorded were just succulent, and I can understand why Greg feels the way he is, not only because of the lyrics and the way he sang, but also because of the way he cleverly incorporated the emotions into the musicality of it as well, the instrumentation, the little instruments and some of the synthy bits and the pads and the brass and just everything there. I think this is self-evident in a lot of what I've said about this album. I don't want to sort of reiterate too much, especially because people who are watching this have watched a 3-hour review and they probably don't want to hear me go through each of the 30 tracks again. You've got chapters in this YouTube video for the specific reason, but it's basically pretty much a 10 out of 10 for me. Well, without hyperbole here, I'm hoping that Greg, I'm hoping this is his big one. I hope he finds success with this if he hasn't already. He deserves it. I'm also hoping that people take the time to listen through this album in the way it has been put here, because if they don't, they might miss some important contextual clues here. I'm sorry to hear that Greg Barnett has struggled so much with his relationships, but I'm hoping that he's found better days now. I'm hoping he's found people who can work together with him. I'm glad that he can look at the stuff objectively and find the best way of dealing with his situation, because even if the situation, especially with the planet Earth, feels hopeless, he still has a little bit of hope if we can get together. And I wouldn't trust the politicians either. Just between you and me, I just don't. I mean, I live in New Zealand, and not to get, I think our government understands, they're trying to get they're putting subsidies on electric cars, and a lot of the power companies are trying to switch to renewable energy and stuff like that, which is good. But we've still got our fair share of people who just don't care, and it just sucks. And I live in a city at the moment where we will experience flooding that will reclaim these parts of the city that I live in. So a lot of people are looking to move to the hills. So that's fun. And it's going to be a wild ride. But anyways, this is my review of Greg Barnett's The Flat White Album. Hopefully you enjoyed it. For those who watched this review in its entirety, thank you. I know this would have been an absolute nightmare for a lot of my subscribers who predominantly speak Chinese and who will have no idea why I've done this review without subtitles. This just would have been it just wouldn't have been tenable if I'd had to put subtitles with this. The subtitles I have, even though they're a lot better than they used to be, still aren't perfect, and so I just needed to do this one without the subtitles. If you did enjoy this, go show Greg Barnett some love. He genuinely cares about people. He wants to have intelligent conversations with you about the stuff that he thinks about. He's treated you with respect as a listener by trying to play the best performances he can, making really interesting music and recording it well and professionally. And I just don't think you're going to get better than this anytime soon. The guy's just an absolute, he's an expert at what he does. And it's evident throughout listening to this review. And I just wasn't bored. And that's saying something, because I tend to get bored very, very easily, especially after the amount of music that I've listened to. Stay cool, stay safe. Remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as we need the help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. Catch you in the next review. Spider hands out.